The morning sun cast long shadows across the peaceful colony of New Busan. Yoonji Choi walked through the mining settlement, checking on the workers as they prepared for another day. The colony had been her home for 5 years now, and she loved watching the sunrise over the red mountains. Children played in the streets while their parents headed to the mines. It was a simple life, but a good one. Far above in the cold darkness of space, Captain Taehyun Lee stood on the bridge of his exploration ship, Harmony's Edge. He had been mapping this sector for 3 months, looking for new worlds where humans could build homes. His crew was small but skilled. They all believed in humanity's mission to spread peace across the galaxy. "Captain," called his communications officer, "we're getting strange readings from the outer system." Taehyun moved to look at the screens. Large ships were moving toward New Busan, ships he had never seen before. They were massive, dark, and covered in weapons. His heart began to race. "Send a message to the colony. Tell them to prepare for visitors." On the planet below, Yoonji received the message with worry. Unknown ships meant possible danger. She quickly called together the colony leaders. They had no weapons, no defenses. New Busan was a mining colony, not a military base. The alien ships entered orbit around New Busan like hungry wolves surrounding prey. They were Vorthak vessels, belonging to one of the most feared military empires in the galaxy. The Vorthak believed that only the strong deserved to live. They had conquered dozens of worlds, enslaving or destroying anyone who stood in their way. Supreme Commander Velthar stood in his flagship's command center. He was tall and covered in gray scales, with burning red eyes that showed no mercy. Around him, his officers prepared for what they believed would be an easy victory. "Humans," Velthar said with disgust. "They explore, they mine, they build, but they do not fight. They will surrender quickly." His general, Threxmol, nodded. "Their ships carry no weapons, Commander. Their colonies have no shields. This will be simple." Meanwhile, on the distant station of Nexus Prime, Ambassador So-Jin Kim sat in the Galactic Council chambers. She had spent years building friendships with alien species, working to create peace between different worlds. The Council was a place where problems could be solved with words instead of weapons. The chamber fell silent as a Vorthak messenger entered. The alien was smaller than the warriors, but his message was just as threatening. He carried a datapad with the hegemony's demands. "The Vorthak hegemony demands that all human colonies in the Outer Rim surrender immediately," the messenger announced. "You have 72 standard hours to remove your military forces and accept Vorthak rule. If you refuse, we will take your worlds by force." So-Jin stood up, her face calm but her heart pounding. "The Terran Federation has always sought peace. Why do you threaten us?" "We have done nothing to harm your people." The messenger laughed coldly. "You exist in space that we want. That is reason enough. 72 hours, human. Choose wisely." The news reached Earth within hours. Admiral Hyon Woo Park sat in the emergency meeting of the Terran High Command. Around the table sat the most important leaders of humanity. General Won-Sik Nam wanted to fight immediately. Director Hye-Jin Lim of the Diplomatic Corps still hoped for peace. "We cannot let them take our colonies," General Nam said, hitting the table with his fist. "Our people trust us to protect them." "But if we fight, millions could die," Director Lim replied. "Perhaps we can negotiate. Find some other solution." Admiral Park listened to both sides. He had seen war before, long ago. He knew its terrible cost. But he also knew that sometimes good people had to fight to protect what they loved. "How long until their deadline?" he asked. 68 hours, sir," replied his aide. Back at New Busan, the situation grew worse. More Vorthak ships arrived every hour. Captain Tae-hyun tried to stay hidden behind one of the system's moons, but he knew his small ship could do nothing against the alien fleet. Yoonji gathered all the colonists in the main hall. Men, women, and children filled the room. Their faces showed fear, but also determination. These people had come to New Busan to build something good. They would not give up without trying to save their home. "We've sent messages to Earth," Yunji told them. "Help is coming. We just need to be strong until it arrives." An old miner named Dong Su raised his hand. "What if help doesn't come in? Time? What if we have to surrender?" Yunji looked around the room at all the faces. These were her people, her responsibility. "Then we face whatever comes together, but we don't give up hope." The hours passed slowly. On Earth, Admiral Park received reports from across human space. The Vorthak were not just threatening New Busan, they had ships near 17 different colonies. This was not a small raid. This was the beginning of a war. The deadline approached like a storm. Captain Tae-hyun watched from his hiding place as the Vorthak fleet moved into attack position around New Busan. He wanted to help, but his exploration ship had no weapons. All he could do was record what happened and hope someone would survive to see it. The final hour arrived. On New Busan, families held each other close. Some prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Others just watched the sky, waiting for the end or for salvation. The Vorthak ships opened fire. Captain Tae-hyun watched in horror as energy beams struck the colony. Buildings exploded. The careful work of years was destroyed in minutes. But somehow Yunji managed to reach the communications center. Her final message went out across space, reaching Earth just as the last building fell. "This is New Busan, colony. We are under attack. The Vorthak they're destroying everything. Tell our families we tried to be brave. Tell them we—" The message ended in static. Admiral Park stood in the command center on Earth, listening to the silence where Yunji's voice had been. Around him, his officers waited for orders. The general wanted to launch the fleet immediately. The director still hoped for diplomacy, but Admiral Park was thinking about the children of New Busan, about the miners who just wanted to build a better life, about the trust his people had placed in him to keep them safe. He walked to the communications console and opened a channel to every Vorthak ship in the galaxy, Vorthak hegemony. His voice was calm but cold as winter. "You have chosen to make war upon humanity. You believe us weak because we sought peace. You are gravely mistaken. You want war? Then you've chosen destruction." Supreme Commander Velthar listened to Admiral Park's message with amusement. In his command center, surrounded by his officers, the Vorthak leader began to laugh. It was a harsh, cruel sound that echoed through the metal halls of his flagship. "Did you hear that, Threxmol?" Velthar asked his general. "The humans threaten us with destruction. These peaceful explorers think they can fight the Vorthak hegemony." General Threxmol nodded, his scaled face showing the same cruel smile. "They have no warships, Commander. Their vessels carry mining equipment and scientific instruments. They are sheep trying to frighten wolves." The other officers joined in the laughter. They had fought many wars and conquered many worlds. The humans seemed no different from any other weak species they had destroyed. In fact, they seemed weaker. Most species fought back immediately when threatened. The humans had tried to talk. "First, send word to all fleet commanders," Velthar ordered. "Begin the invasion of human space. Take their colonies one by one. Show them what happens to those who stand against us." But on Earth, something was changing. Deep beneath the surface, in hidden bunkers that had been built long ago, ancient systems came to life. Red lights began blinking. Computers that had been sleeping for over a century started running again. Dr. Mi-kyung Seo stood in the center of the Terran Defense Research Institute. Around her, scientists and engineers worked frantically at their computers. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but today those eyes were hard as steel. "Activate Protocol 7, she commanded. "Begin Phase 1 immediately." Across the solar system, asteroids that had seemed empty for decades suddenly split open. Inside were massive shipyards, hidden from any alien eyes that might be watching. Thousands of workers who had been living normal lives as farmers, teachers, and shopkeepers received coded messages. They left their homes and reported to secret facilities. On a small space station near Jupiter, Captain Dong-Hyun Jung read his orders with surprise. For the past 10 years, he had been flying cargo ships between the outer colonies. It was boring work, but peaceful. He had told his family he was just a simple freight pilot. Now his real orders had arrived. He was no longer Captain Jung of the merchant fleet. He was Admiral Jung, commander of the experimental dreadnought Retribution. His cargo runs had been a cover while he waited for the day humanity might need its warriors again. The Retribution was unlike any ship the galaxy had ever seen. It had been built in secret, using technology that had been developed but never revealed. Its weapons could destroy entire fleets. Its armor could survive attacks that would vaporize normal ships. Colonel Young Akwon received her orders while teaching at a university on Mars. Her students knew her as a professor of history. They had no idea that she had once led the most dangerous soldiers in human space. The Ghost Division had been disbanded after the last war, but its members had never really left. Within hours, her old team began gathering. Men and women who had been mechanics, doctors, and artists put on military uniforms again. They had been waiting 20 years for this call. In the Kepler system, engineer Kai-wook Bae worked at what everyone thought was a research station studying solar energy. The station had been there for 15 years, conducting boring experiments that no one paid attention to. Alien traders sometimes stopped by, and they always saw the same thing: human scientists doing harmless research. Now Kai-wook entered a code into his computer that he had memorized but never used. The research station began to change. Walls moved aside to reveal massive weapons. The solar collectors turned out to be energy generators more powerful than anything the Vorthak had ever built. Similar transformations were happening throughout human space. Mining stations revealed hidden missile launchers. Trade ships dropped fake cargo containers to show military-grade engines. Peaceful colonies activated defense shields that had been disguised as weather control systems. The Galactic Council watched these changes with growing alarm. Council Speaker Kethlon was an old amphibian who had seen many wars, but never anything like this. The humans had seemed so peaceful, so harmless. How had they hidden so much military power? "Speaker," his aide whispered, "our sensors are detecting massive energy signatures throughout human space. Ships, weapons, facilities we never knew existed." Kethlon's large eyes blinked slowly. "Contact Ambassador Kim immediately. We need to understand what is happening." Subin Han, the human delegate to the Galactic Council, sat calmly in her office. She had been expecting this call. Outside her window, she could see alien diplomats running between buildings, trying to understand what the humans were doing. When Kethlon arrived, his face showed deep concern. "Ambassador Han, what is your military doing? These energy readings suggest weapons of incredible power." Subin looked at him with eyes that had become cold as space. "We are responding to an act of war, Speaker. The Vorthak destroyed New Busan. They killed 50,000 civilians. They have declared their intention to conquer human space. But where did these weapons come from? We had no idea humanity possessed such military capability. We are a peaceful people, Speaker. But we learned long ago that sometimes peace must be defended with strength. What you are seeing now is humanity preparing to defend itself." The first test of this new reality came at the Kepler system, where Admiral Junho Shin waited with his task force. He had been a history teacher just 1 week ago. Now he commanded 12 ships that the Vorthak had never seen before. The Vorthak fleet arrived expecting easy victory. 300 ships, enough to conquer any normal system. Their commander, War Chief Grixtal, looked at the human force with contempt. 12 ships? he laughed. "The humans send 12 ships against 300? They have lost their minds." He opened communications to the human fleet. "Surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick." Admiral Shin's response was calm and quiet. "Vorthak fleet, you have entered human space without permission and with hostile intent. Leave now or face the consequences." The Vorthak response was to open fire with every weapon they had. What happened next shocked the entire galaxy. The human ships moved like nothing the Vorthak had ever seen. They were faster, more agile, and their weapons cut through Vorthak armor, like paper through silk. Energy beams that should have destroyed the human vessels were absorbed by shields that seemed to bend light itself. In 15 minutes, the battle was over. 300 Vorthak ships had been reduced to burning wreckage. Only one survived, and that was because Admiral Shin had deliberately let it escape. "Let them go," he told his weapons officer. "Someone needs to tell the others what they saw here." The surviving Vorthak ship limped back to their territory, carrying news that would shake the hegemony to its core. War Chief Grixtal, badly wounded, and in shock, made his report to Supreme Commander Velthar. "They destroyed everything, Commander. Their ships. They moved like living things. Their weapons burned through our hull plating like it was nothing, and they let me live to tell you this." Velthar's confidence began to crack. Impossible. Humans are weak. They have no military tradition. But deep in his heart, he was beginning to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans had not been weak. They had been sleeping, and now they were awake. The news of the Battle of Kepler spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In just 15 minutes, a small human fleet had destroyed 300 Vorthak warships. Species that had feared the Vorthak for generations suddenly began to whisper about the humans who had seemed so peaceful. Supreme Commander Velthar stood in his war room, staring at the tactical displays that showed the destruction of his fleet. The holographic images played over and over, Vorthak ships exploding, human vessels moving through space like deadly dancers, weapons that cut through military-grade armor as if it were made of paper. "How?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "How did they hide this from us?" General Threxmol had no answer. None of his intelligence officers had predicted this. They had watched human space for years, seeing only explorers, miners, and traders. Now those same humans were revealing weapons technology that surpassed anything in the galaxy. Captain Tae-hyun Lee, who had witnessed the destruction of New Busan, now commanded a very different ship. The Silent Thunder looked like a simple cargo vessel from the outside, but inside it contained stealth technology that made it invisible to Vorthak sensors. His crew had been carefully chosen. Weapons officer Yeon-Soo Park had once designed targeting systems, and engineer Sang-Min Oh had spent 10 years pretending to fix civilian computers while actually maintaining military equipment. "Take us deep into Vorthak territory," Tae-hyun ordered. "It's time to show them that nowhere is safe." The Silent Thunder slipped past Vorthak patrol ships like a ghost in the night. The aliens never knew it was there as it approached their supply depot at Morgul Station. The station was massive, providing fuel and ammunition to dozens of Vorthak fleets. It was supposed to be one of the most secure facilities in their empire. Sang-min worked at his console, his fingers dancing across the controls. "I'm detecting their main power core. One precise shot should start a chain reaction." "Do it," Tae-hyun said quietly. The Silent Thunder fired a single, perfectly aimed energy beam. The weapon struck the power core with surgical precision, causing a massive explosion that destroyed the entire station. Hundreds of Vorthak supply ships were vaporized in seconds. The explosion was so bright it could be seen from 3 star systems away. Similar strikes were happening throughout Vorthak space. Human stealth ships appeared without warning, destroyed key targets, and vanished before the aliens could respond. Communication relays, Weapons factories and command centers were eliminated with precision that terrified the Vorthak leadership. But the humans were not only fighting a military war. Ambassador So-Jin Kim worked tirelessly at the Galactic Council, speaking with representatives from dozens of species. Many of them had been enslaved or threatened by the Vorthak, but they had been too afraid to resist. The Vorthak claimed they were invincible, So-Jin told the insectoid Klixin ambassador. But now you have seen the truth. They can be defeated. You do not have to live in fear anymore. The Klixin had been Vorthak subjects for 50 years, forced to provide raw materials for the hegemony's war machine. Their ambassador's compound eyes showed hope for the first time in decades. If the humans can truly defeat the Vorthak, the ambassador clicked in his own language. The Klixin will remember this kindness. The energy-based ethereals, who existed as pure consciousness within crystalline matrices, also declared their neutrality. Their spokesperson, a shimmering form of living light, addressed the council with words that resonated like music. The humans fight not for conquest, but for protection. This is a war we can support. Even more surprising was the support that came from the Melodians, a peaceful species that had never been involved in any conflict. Their harmony keeper, Lintel, approached So-Jin in private. Our people cannot fight, Lintel explained, her voice like gentle wind chimes. But we can provide medical aid to the wounded and shelter to refugees. The humans showed us kindness when we needed help. Now we will return that kindness. General Won-Sik Nam had been planning for this moment for 20 years. His psychological warfare division, led by Major In-suk Ryu, began broadcasting throughout Vorthak space. The messages were simple but powerful. Videos showing Vorthak forces destroying innocent colonies, recordings of Vorthak commanders laughing about the suffering they caused, evidence of how the hegemony treated its own soldiers. The effect was immediate. Species that had been forced to serve the Vorthak began to rebel. The Nexari, who had been providing technical support, sabotaged Vorthak computer systems. The Zephyrians, once proud warriors who had been conquered and enslaved, rose up against their oppressors. On a dozen worlds, Vorthak garrisons found themselves under attack from their own former subjects. The rebellion spread like a plague, weakening the hegemony from within. Dr. Mi-kyung Seo stood in her laboratory, looking at the weapon that could end the war in minutes. The Stellar Cascade device was humanity's ultimate deterrent, capable of destabilizing stars and destroying entire solar systems. She had hoped they would never need to build it, but the Vorthak had left them no choice. "Are you certain this will work?" asked Admiral Park, who had come to see the weapon himself. "The mathematics are sound," Dr. Seo replied. "One device can cause a star to collapse. The resulting explosion would sterilize everything within 10 light years." Admiral Park nodded grimly. "And if the Vorthak refused to surrender, then we use it on their homeworld star. The Mordalis system would be completely destroyed. It would be the end of their civilization." Word of the weapon's existence reached the Galactic Council within hours. Council Speaker Kethlon called an emergency session, his amphibian features showing deep concern. "The humans have developed a weapon that can destroy stars," he announced to the shocked assembly. "They have the power to end entire civilizations." The Vorthak delegate, a minor official who had been sent to spy on the council, went pale beneath his scales. He immediately sent a message to Supreme Commander Velthar. "The humans can destroy suns. They can kill our homeworld." Velthar received the message just as reports arrived of another disaster. The Second Battle of Vega had begun, and it was not going well for the Vorthak. Admiral Park himself was leading the human fleet, supported by ships from a dozen different species who had joined the fight against the hegemony. Commander Hyo Jin-cha led the marine assault on the Vorthak fortress world of Vega Prime. Her soldiers, moved through the enemy's defenses like a force of nature, their advanced armor and weapons making them nearly unstoppable. The Vorthak had never faced infantry like this. Soldiers who could survive direct hits from energy weapons, who could see through walls, who moved with perfect coordination. The fortress fell in 6 hours. Vega Prime, which had been considered one of the strongest military bases in Vorthak space, was now under human control. Supreme Commander Velthar looked at the reports flooding in from across his empire. Rebellions on 30 worlds, supply lines cut, key facilities destroyed, his best fortress captured, and somewhere in human space a weapon that could destroy his homeworld's star. For the first time in his long military career, Velthar felt something he had never experienced before: fear. The humans had been hiding their true strength for decades, pretending to be weak while building the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. "Contact our remaining fleet commanders," he ordered General Threxmol. "Pull back all forces to defend the core worlds and send a message to the humans. Tell them we wish to discuss terms." But even as he spoke, Velthar knew it might already be too late. The humans had been patient and peaceful for so long. Now that they were truly angry, would they accept anything less than complete victory? In space around Vega Prime, Admiral Park stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the last Vorthak ships flee toward their homeworld. His officers were celebrating the victory, but the Admiral's face showed no joy. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a message from the Vorthak Supreme Commander. He wants to negotiate." Admiral Park was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke words that would echo through history. "Tell him he had his chance to negotiate. Now he has chosen war, and in war, there can be only one ending." The Vorthak hegemony was falling apart like a house built on sand. Supreme Commander Velthar sat in his command chamber, watching red warning lights flash across dozens of displays. Every screen showed the same story: defeat, retreat, rebellion. His mighty empire was crumbling under the human assault. "Commander," General Threxmol reported with a shaking voice, "we have lost contact with the outer defense ring. The humans have broken through our last major defensive line." Velthar's scaled hands gripped the arms of his command chair. In just 2 months, the humans had destroyed 3/4 of his fleet and liberated dozens of worlds. Species that had been enslaved for generations were now fighting alongside. "The human forces. What about General Krixvar's forces?" Velthar asked. Threxmol's expression grew even darker. "General Krixvar has declared independence from your command, sir. He claims you have brought disaster upon our people. Half of the inner fleet has joined his rebellion." The hegemony was not only losing the war against humanity, it was tearing itself apart from within. Velthar had ruled through fear and strength, but now that strength was broken, his own generals were beginning to see him as a failure. In desperation, Velthar made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. If he could not defeat the humans through conventional warfare, he would use a weapon so terrible that even he had hesitated to employ it. "Activate the plague protocol," he commanded. The room fell silent. Even his most loyal officers stared at him in shock. The plague protocol was a bioweapon that had been developed in secret, designed to kill all carbon-based life forms. It was so deadly that the Vorthak had never dared to use it before. "Commander," General Threxmol whispered, "the bioweapon cannot distinguish between enemies and civilians. It will kill everyone on the target worlds." "Then the humans will know the price of opposing us," Velthar replied coldly. "Deploy it against their largest colony worlds. If they will not surrender, then let them all die." The bioweapon was released on 3 human colonies: New Sol, Haven's Rest, and Prosperity Station. The invisible death spread through the air, like a silent ghost, killing everything it touched. Plants withered and died. Animals collapsed where they stood. And then the people began to fall. On New Sol, 50 million humans lived and worked in cities that spanned an entire continent. The bioweapon reached them during the morning rush hour, when families were saying goodbye and children were walking to school. By evening, the cities were silent. Colonel Young A. Kwan received the news while planning an assault on a Vorthak stronghold. Her aide handed her a communication pad with a trembling hand. "Colonel, there's been an attack on New Seoul. Your family was visiting there for your daughter's graduation." Young A read the report with growing horror. Her wife, her 2 children, her elderly parents, all dead, along with 50 million others. The bioweapon had killed them in minutes, but their suffering had lasted much longer. War correspondent Byung-ho Lee was one of the first reporters to reach New Seoul after the attack. His camera recorded scenes that no human should ever have to see. Empty streets filled with the dead, children's toys scattered on playgrounds where no one would ever play again. The footage was broadcast across human space and beyond, reaching every corner of the galaxy. The effect was immediate and terrible. Every human who saw those images felt something change inside them. The desire for peace, for mercy, for forgiveness. All of it died in that moment. What remained was a cold, burning anger that would not be satisfied until the Vorthak paid for what they had done. Admiral Park stood in the Terran High Command, watching the footage from New Seoul with tears streaming down his face. Around him, his officers were silent. Some were crying, others had faces like stone. All of them were thinking the same thing. "Issue Protocol Omega," Admiral Park said quietly. General Won-sik Nam looked up. "Sir, Protocol Omega means total war. No quarter given, no mercy shown. Complete destruction of Vorthak civilization." "They killed our children," Admiral Park replied. "They used a weapon that murders innocents. They have chosen to become monsters. Now they will face the consequences." Captain Dong-hyun Jung received his new orders aboard the dreadnought Retribution. The massive warship was leading a fleet of 200 vessels toward the Vorthak core systems. His mission was simple: destroy everything. No Vorthak military asset was to be left intact. "Target their shipyards," Jung commanded his weapons officer. "If they want to build ships of war, they will need to rebuild their entire industrial base first." The human fleet moved through Vorthak space like a force of nature. Shipyards that had taken decades to build were destroyed in minutes. Military bases were reduced to rubble. Any Vorthak ship that tried to fight was quickly overwhelmed and destroyed. Field Marshal Zon Kar commanded the Vorthak Third Fleet, one of the last organized military forces in the hegemony. He had been a proud warrior once, believing in the strength and superiority of his people. Now he watched his ships being hunted down one by human forces that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Marshal," his aide reported, "long-range sensors detect human ships approaching from 3 directions. We are surrounded." Zonkar looked at the tactical display. His 12 remaining ships faced a human fleet of 40 vessels. The humans had learned to hunt in packs, using superior numbers and technology to overwhelm any Vorthak force they encountered. "Open communications to the human fleet," Zonkar ordered. His officers stared at him in shock. "Marshal, you cannot mean to surrender." "I will not send our remaining crews to certain death," Zonkar replied. "Perhaps if we surrender, some of our people might survive this war." The human response came from Admiral Jun-ho Shin personally. "Vorthak Fleet, this is Admiral Shin. You have exactly 1 opportunity to surrender. Drop your shields, power down, your weapons, and prepare to be boarded. Any hostile action will result in your immediate destruction." Zonkar gave the orders with a heavy heart. It was the first time in Vorthak history that an entire fleet had surrendered without firing a shot. Intelligence officer Sul Ki-yoon interrogated Zonkar aboard the human flagship. The Vorthak field marshal was a broken creature, his proud bearing, replaced by the defeated posture of someone who had lost everything he believed in. "Where is your Supreme Commander's headquarters?" Yoon asked. Mordalis Prime, Zonkar replied without hesitation. Deep beneath the surface, in bunkers that were built to survive anything. But it will not matter. Velthar has already lost this war. He lost it the moment he decided to make enemies of humanity. Dr. Aaron Kim worked frantically in her laboratory, trying to develop a cure for the Vorthak bioweapon. She had been racing against time since the first reports came in from New Sol, but the alien disease was unlike anything she had ever seen. The bioweapon attacks the cellular structure directly, she explained to Admiral Park during his visit to her lab. It essentially dissolves living tissue from the inside. By the time symptoms appear, it's already too late. Can you create an antidote? Admiral Park asked. I believe so, but it will take time. And meanwhile, the weapon continues to spread. Haven's Rest reported its first cases this morning. We estimate another 40 million dead within the week. The numbers were staggering. Over 100 million humans had died from the bioweapon, and more were dying every day. The colonies had been evacuated, but not before the disease claimed entire generations of families. On Earth, massive crowds gathered outside government buildings, demanding justice for the dead. Journalist Mingyu Choi reported from the protests, where the signs all carried the same message. Remember New Sol, no mercy for monsters. Ambassador Sojin Kim sat in her office at the Galactic Council, rejecting the third ceasefire proposal of the day. Representatives from dozens of species had come to her, begging for an end to the violence. But her answer was always the same. The Vorthak chose to murder our civilians with a bioweapon, she told Council Speaker Kethalon. They killed our children, our elderly, our innocent. There can be no peace while they still draw breath. But surely some form of compromise is possible, the amphibian leader pleaded. The destruction you are causing will echo through history. So Jin's eyes were cold as space itself. Good. Let history remember what happens to those who commit genocide against humanity. Let every species in this galaxy know the price of such crimes. The siege of Mordalis began on a Tuesday morning, when Admiral Junho Shin's combined fleet surrounded the Vorthak homeworld. Over 500 ships, from a dozen different species, had joined the final assault. The humans had kept their promise to liberate the enslaved races, and now those races were helping to end the war. Supreme Commander Velthar looked up at the sky from his underground bunker, knowing that above him waited the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. His empire was gone. His fleets were destroyed. His people were dying. And still, the humans kept coming. The sky above Mordalis burned with the light of 500 warships. Admiral Junho Shin stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the massive Vorthak homeworld slowly turn beneath them. This was where it would all end, the war that had started with the destruction of New Busan, the war that had cost over 100 million human lives. Admiral, his communications officer reported, all fleet units are in position. The orbital defense grid is completely surrounded. Shin nodded. The Vorthak had built their homeworld's defenses over centuries, creating a network of weapons platforms and shield generators that they believed could stop any attack. But they had not planned for this. The combined might of humanity and their liberated allies, armed with weapons that the Vorthak had never imagined possible. Begin the assault, Shin commanded. The battle for Mordalis lasted exactly 3 days. The Vorthak defense grid, once considered the strongest fortification in the galaxy, crumbled under the coordinated assault. Human ships moved with perfect precision, their weapons cutting through alien technology like hot knives through ice. General Won-Sik Nam coordinated the orbital bombardment from his command ship. Each target was carefully chosen: military installations, government buildings, industrial centers. The humans did not bomb civilian areas, but they made sure that the Vorthak war machine was completely destroyed. On the surface, Colonel Young A Quan led her ghost division through the burning ruins of the Vorthak capital city. Her soldiers moved like shadows through the smoke and flames, eliminating the last pockets of resistance. The colonel's face was like stone. She had not smiled or laughed since receiving news of her family's death on New Sol. All defensive. Positions secured, she reported to Admiral Shin. We have located the entrance to the underground command bunker. Deep beneath the surface of Mordalis, Supreme Commander Velthar made his final desperate gambit. If he could not win the war, he would at least deny the humans their victory. The Vorthak homeworld was built around an unstable star core, a dangerous but powerful energy source that had provided unlimited power for generations. Activate the core destabilization sequence, Velthar ordered his remaining officers. If we must die, we will take the humans with us. The plan was simple and terrible. By overloading the planetary core, Velthar could cause Mordalis to explode like a massive bomb. The explosion would destroy the human fleet and every living thing within several light years. It would be the end of the Vorthak homeworld. But it would also be revenge against humanity. But the humans had learned to expect treachery from their enemies. Captain Tae-hyun Lee and his infiltration team had been watching the underground facility for hours, waiting for exactly this moment. Target the core control room, Tae-hyun whispered into his communicator. We have maybe 2 minutes before they complete the sequence. His team moved through the underground tunnels like ghosts, their advanced equipment allowing them to see in complete darkness and move without making a sound. They reached the core control room just as the Vorthak technicians began the final activation sequence. The firefight was brief but intense. Energy weapons flashed in the darkness, illuminating the massive machinery that controlled the planet's power source. When the smoke cleared, the Vorthak technicians were dead, and the destabilization sequence had been stopped with seconds to spare. Supreme Commander Velthar sat in his command chamber, watching the last of his loyal guards fall to human soldiers. The bunker that was supposed to protect him had become his tomb. Now there was nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide. Admiral Park entered the chamber personally, flanked by 2 Marines in advanced combat armor. The Vorthak leader looked up at him with eyes that had once burned with arrogance, but now showed only defeat and despair. So, Velthar said quietly, the peaceful humans have come to finish what I started. Admiral Park looked down at the alien, who had caused so much suffering. You had a choice, Velthar. We offered you peace. We wanted nothing but to live quietly and explore the stars. You chose war instead. I thought you were weak, Velthar replied. Your people spoke of peace and showed kindness to other species. We believed this made you inferior. Now you know the truth, Admiral Park said. Humanity learned to make war over thousands of years of conflict. We perfected the art of destruction, then chose to put it aside. Your greatest mistake was forcing us to pick it up again. Velthar was silent for a long moment. Around him, the sounds of battle were fading as the last Vorthak forces surrendered. What will happen to my people now? That depends, Admiral Park replied. Will they accept responsibility for their crimes? Will they work to rebuild what they have destroyed? Or will they choose to follow your path of conquest and murder? The formal surrender of the Vorthak hegemony took place 1 week later aboard Admiral Park's flagship. The remaining Vorthak leaders, those who had survived the war, signed documents that officially ended their empire and accepted human oversight of their remaining territories. Judge Advocate General Eugene Huang presided over the war crimes tribunals that followed. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy, showing species everywhere that there would be consequences for genocide and the targeting of civilians. Velthar himself stood trial for the bioweapon attacks on New Sol, Haven's Rest, and Prosperity Station. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings of his orders, testimony from his own officers, the dead worlds themselves serving as proof of his crimes. Supreme Commander Velthar, Judge Huang announced, You are found guilty of genocide, crimes against sentient life, and the use of prohibited biological weapons. You are sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of release. As Velthar was led away in chains, he looked back at the human judge. You have won everything, he said. Why do you not simply execute me? Because we are not you. Judge, Huang replied. We do not kill helpless prisoners, no matter what crimes they have committed. That is the difference between us. The aftermath of the war reshaped the entire galaxy. The Terran Federation had become the dominant military power, but Admiral Park surprised everyone by immediately beginning a massive disarmament program. We did not fight this war to become conquerors, he announced in his address to the Galactic Council. We fought to preserve peace and protect the innocent. Now that the war is over, we will return to what we have always been, explorers, builders, and defenders of those who cannot defend themselves. Ambassador Sojin Kim helped establish the new Galactic Accords, a treaty system that provided stronger protections for civilian populations and clear consequences for unprovoked aggression. The human military, now reorganized under Admiral Shin's command, took on a peacekeeping role throughout the galaxy. The liberated species that had been enslaved by the Vorthak were given their freedom and assistance in rebuilding their worlds. The Klixen resumed their ancient traditions of art and philosophy. The Zephyrians rebuilt their warrior culture, but this time as protectors rather than conquerors. The gentle Melodians helped heal the psychological wounds left by years of war. 5. Years after the end of the war, a great memorial was built on the site where New Sol had once stood. The memorial of the fallen bore the names of every being who had died in the conflict, human and alien alike, civilian and soldier, friend and enemy. Dr. Mikyung Seo, now heading the Galactic Reconstruction Initiative, spoke at the memorial's dedication. Representatives from dozens of species had come to pay their respects to the dead. We gather here not to celebrate victory, she said, but to remember the cost of war. These names represent lives that could have been saved if wisdom had prevailed over aggression, if peace had been chosen over conquest. In his prison cell on a remote asteroid station, former Supreme Commander Velthar spent his days writing his memoirs. The galaxy's most feared military leader had become a broken old alien, haunted by the ghosts of the millions who had died because of his choices. His final entry would become one of the most widely read documents in galactic history. I write these words as a warning to any who might read them in years to come. We looked upon humanity and saw a species that seemed weak because they chose peace over war. We mistook their kindness for inability, their desire for harmony as a sign of inferior strength. We learned too late that the species capable of the greatest compassion is also capable of the most terrible retribution. They had perfected the art of war across millennia of conflict, then put aside their weapons to build something better. When we forced them to take up those weapons again, we sealed our own doom. Let no other species repeat our folly. Let no one mistake human mercy for human weakness. 20 years later, the galaxy faced a new threat. Distress signals came from the outer rim, where an unknown species was facing extinction from a plague that was consuming entire worlds. The call for help reached Admiral Minjun Park, son of the legendary Hyunwoo Park, as he stood on the bridge of the newest human flagship. All fleets, prepare for immediate deployment, the younger Park ordered. We have people to save. The base crew moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for another mission beyond the edge of known space. They were no longer going to war. They were going to rescue those who could not save themselves.